It's like the bridge that takes a million cars, and then all of a sudden the millionth and first,
Yeah.
and the bridge crumbles. Why did that happen? So,
Yes. Yep.
Joe, Chris, I want to take the time remaining to ask you to do something a little bit unusual, which is to put your mind in the place of General Gerasimov, the Russian chief of staff, who's just been named the overall battle commander. As we said in the introduction to our program, that there's a history of political leaders turning to savior generals in our own country. President Lincoln just couldn't find the right general. General McClellan famously had the slows going after the Confederates. They finally decided on General Grant and General Sherman, and the Civil War was won. In Iraq, terrible problems with your predecessors getting to a stable point, and then you came in with the surge and had better results. Let's think about Putin's search for a savior general. He's been through three or four commanders, depending on how you count. He's now got Gerasimov in place. So let me ask you to do something that's unusual. If you were Gerasimov, trying to think, how do I take what's been a really unsuccessful campaign now for almost a year and turn it around? What are the things that would be part of getting the Russians on a better foot? What do they need to do to perform better?
Frankly, what they need to do is perform tasks that they should have been doing, 5 and 10 years ago. They need to conduct really rigorous training. What's a mystery to me, David, is that they had months during which they were assembled on the borders of Ukraine in Belarus and Russia. And as far as I can tell, they did nothing in the way of training. If you'd given us, our commanders, months, we'd train that force to a razor's edge. And they did not. And we saw the results of that. They should have had a professional non-commissioned officer corps a long time ago. They shouldn't have the kind of top-down leadership structure that doesn't prize initiative at lower levels. They need a larger logistics force structure. Once they leave the railways, they have roughly a quarter of what we have, and they don't have real expeditionary logistics. They have a lousy command control communication system. It's HF, single channel, not encrypted. Anybody with a police radio can jam it. So the list goes on and on of the deficiencies that he actually has to overcome. Some of these obviously are much longer term. I mean, you're talking about an entire service culture. You're talking about practices, how, again, command is exercised and so forth. What he could do in the short term, and what they're trying to do, is just generate additional forces. Of course, there will be, we expect, another mobilization. Can they train them better? Could they achieve combined arms operations? Can they revive their military industrial capacity? The export controls are really crippling it. Can they actually produce the thousands of tanks that they have lost and other armored and wheeled vehicle systems, air defenses, and all the rest of that? Then can they make additional missiles and drones, or do they have to get them from Iran? They're in a very, very difficult position, I think, and the options that they've had so far have been just basically to throw soldiers into the line with modest equipment that's not good kit, and they're not well trained. So again, his options, I think, at this point, are not particularly attractive. He isn't going to bring real additional capability. Now, again, quantity has a quality of its own, and especially if the order is to take the rest of Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts, if that is his mission, I'm not sure I see how he conducts that. Again, given that these grinding attacks that they've been conducting have achieved relatively modest gains, but at very high cost, and they're also destroying the locations that they're trying to take. So he's in a difficult position, and the ills that afflict Russia are those that would require a real overhaul, very similar, frankly, to what our Army had to do after Vietnam, where we had to rebuild the non-commissioned officer corps, create combat training centers with really rigorous training, get into real culture of integrity and of after action reviews and inquiry and learning, fostering initiative. All of these kinds of actions are not ones that can be carried out short term. During the surge in Iraq, we could go in, we had a terrific force. We just basically needed to change the big ideas 180 degrees. Instead of consolidating on big bases, we're going to go back into the neighborhoods, live with the people. That's the only way to secure them, take back the control from the Iraqi security forces, promote reconciliation. In other words, you can't kill or capture your way out of an industrial strength insurgency. You have to reconcile with as many of the rank and file as you can, intensify the pursuit of the irreconcilables with our special mission units, closer integration of civil and military, clear hold, build, and transition, not clear and hand off to the Iraqis. So essentially, the surge that mattered most was not actually even the extra 25,000 superb forces, very helpful. The surge was the change in big ideas, the change in strategy, literally 180 degrees, but that was doable. And that was something you could actually see happening. Like we could envision what was possible. In this case, I can't envision what's possible for Gerasimov because it doesn't have the basic tools, the basic capabilities to carry out the kind of offensive operations, combined arms offensive operations, to take the rest of those two provinces, oblasts, that they supposedly want to seize, at least in the near or midterm, while still noting that Putin's overall objectives are still tied up with the notion that Ukraine doesn't have a right to exist as an independent country. It should be part of the Russian Federation.